John, it's another week has passed by and it hasn't gotten any better for the Mets. More disasters for the team from Queens.
Absolutely. I never would have believed they'd be this far under 500 or even under 500 based on that 101 wins last year. Same players back, and they're playing totally differently.
Yeah, it's not been good. We'll delve into that. We'll talk about the toe injury that won't stop giving us news that belongs to Aaron Judge. And Farhan Zaidi, the president of the baseball operations of the San Francisco Giants, will join us if you stick with us on the show with Joel Sherman and John Heyman. John, it's Groundhog's Day. You and I are back doing a podcast, and look, it feels parochial. It feels New York-based, but it's hard to avoid talking about the New York Mets. It's the largest payroll ever by not a little, and it's therefore turning into the biggest disaster ever. And it's another week of me just saying to you, can you believe it? And what do you think?
No, I can't believe it. I'm not sure they're the biggest disappointment in baseball. I guess it's either them or the Cardinals. I think the Padres have been a bit unlucky. They've got a positive run differential. They lose all their one-run games, in fact, all of their extra inning games. The Mets have just frankly been bad. I've lost track. Are they 7 or 8 under? I think they might be
8 under as we're doing this.
I mean, they've just been very bad. There's nothing more that you can say about that. The pitching has been woeful. The offense has been not as good as we thought. Defense has let them down lately. There's really nothing you could say. I mean, they won 101 games last year. It's been a shocking season. I mean, we see the Reds now in contention. They lost 100 last year. I mean, this year obviously has almost nothing to do with last year, except the Braves are good again. That's about it.
Yeah, John, as we're speaking, just to put a finer point on it, 8 games under 500, it's 35-43. It's the 4th worst record in the league. Let's stop talking about the top. They're going to try to have to avoid the very, very bottom here. Fangraphs has them at 12.4% chance to still make the playoffs. By the way, Baseball Reference has them down at 4.3% to make the playoffs. And John, I think you basically hit all the points. It's hard to win baseball games, any singular one, much less run off the kind of streak they're going to need if your starting pitching is no good, your relief pitching is no good. And we're seeing this cascade, right? Even when they get a good start, it isn't a long start. And then you're asked for a short bullpen with not a lot of trustworthy folks in it to try to bridge 8, 9, 12, whatever number of outs with a defense which is ordinary at best and run scoring apparatus that is ordinary at best. None of this is in the top 10. Base running that, again, is not in the top. They don't do anything in the top 10. How are they going to run off a big winning streak?
Well, apparently nobody thinks they are. Let's split the difference. I'm going to say it's probably about 8%. I think that's probably a fair number for them to make the playoffs. And we texted earlier and we went over who do we blame, and although we didn't say who we blame, I'll ask you who you blame. I've got my list of 4 in order of who gets the blame here.
So start us off, John.
It's pretty sad. We're already doing the blame game, and we're not even halfway through the season. It's quite something. Okay, I have it. Old pitchers, number one. They make $43 million a year, so it's easy to blame them first. Scherzer and Verlander, obviously, on their way to the Hall of Fame, but not via anything they've done this year. I've got young pitchers next. I mean, unfortunately, Peterson and McGill have taken a step backward. None of their pitching has really been good. I don't blame the pen. The Diaz injury certainly cost them. These guys are overworked at this point, and the Buck is trying to protect them. Some say too much, maybe, but trying to protect them. And they're thin in the bullpen, so I don't blame the bullpen. They didn't make my list. It's old pitchers, young pitchers, hitters. To me, it's the 3 guys who should be great. Other than Nimmo and Alonso, who've been fine. And I wonder if Alonso's fully recovered. He may have come back a little too soon, but he and Nimmo are doing about what you expect. The hitters for me, McNeil, Marte, and Lindor, I mean, they've been basically league average. Marte a little bit below, probably. That's not good enough. We're talking about a guy who won the batting title last year on McNeil. Obviously, Lindor makes $341 million. Keep him back to the money, but that is a notable thing about the Mets. They are the highest paid team in history. And 4 is the front office. I'm not sure exactly who made all these decisions, but obviously Billy Epler is in charge, and right now they're just not a good team. Obviously Buck's not winning manager of the year, but the front office has a bigger effect on what's going on with any team. So that's why I put front office 4. How do you have it?
Yeah, I think I generally agree. I wanted to talk about two issues that I think have affected this because I think it's very obvious. I don't. That sounds disparaging. I think you have the right list, but I wanted to see if I could go under it. I just want to mention two things. I know I hear so much about New York media and everything. I wonder if we actually undersold the loss of Diaz, and just how important he was, both what he did, what it allowed others to do, what it allowed the manager to do, what it brought confidence wise that if you were winning after 6-7, certainly after 8 innings, you were going to win the game. There's this question on Sunday in Philadelphia: should David Robertson be in the 8th inning with a 3-run lead when he's the only trustworthy reliever? I feel like that's playing the results. I think I've seen that a lot recently. So, I mean, just that everyone has injuries. No, this is not an excuse. I mean, the Braves are in first place without Fried and Wright at the very top of their rotation. But I just wonder if we've underplayed the loss of Diaz. And the other one I'll bring up, John, is I think that their front office has done a terrible job. I think Billy Epler has thrown a bunch of relievers at the wall, and none of them have stuck. It's been bad. Whether you're talking about Leone, Hunter, Brigham, Nagosic, they've all been terrible, cost them games, etc. I just wonder if we underappreciate the number of changes in the front office going into this regime and into Steve Cohen and the ownership that didn't put money into any modernity to try to improve pitching, how people do it now. We are, bless curse, however you want to look at it, John, we watch the other team in town. Every Nick Ramirez they bring up, every Ian Hamilton they bring up, every, Jimmy Cordero, Albert Abreu, like they get key outs for the Yankees. They turn them into something. And to see the Mets' complete inability, is that utter failure by this current administration, or is that calloused over years of not drafting well, developing well, and bringing in the modernity needed, pitching lab, etc., to do it? Because they have no solutions internally. And the external answers that all worked last year haven't worked this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think with the Yankees, that's a different issue. I think Matt Blake, the pitching coach, does a terrific job over there. And you're right about Hamilton and Ramirez and all these guys who have worked out. The Mets bullpen is thin. You mentioned Robertson is their one reliable reliever. I mean, everybody was all over Buck for not bringing him in the 8th rather than the 9th. And I can see that to a degree. And I think he was doing that more often, bringing him in for the Harpers and the Castellanoses of the world rather than, the lower part of the order. I'm not sure why he did it this time, but the problem is they have one great reliever. That's not good for a team with a 300. I've seen different numbers now, but I'm stuck with my $377 million payroll. You should have more than one great reliever. Obviously, the Diaz injury killed them. I did think he was top 10 last year in MVP voting. I'm not sure if anybody else did or he got any of the votes, but he was incredible. I'm not going to blame the media on this one. We wrote about it. I mean, do we want to harp on this forever that, oh boy, woe is them, it's terrible, blah, blah, blah. I mean, the reality is, and we knew this early on, if they had Robertson with Diaz, they'd have the best back end in the National League, also the American League, because obviously Baltimore's has been pretty dynamic as well. But as things stand right now, you can rely on Ottavino, but he's generally been average this year, and Raley, who's been maybe average, maybe a tick above, and you have one great reliever in Robertson. I mean, that's like a small market bullpen, not a $377 million bullpen. That's the bullpen probably should have made my list.
Yeah, look, I do think I want to preface this because I think you and I have known Buck Showalter a long time. I think we respect his work ethic, his intellect. So I want to say it up front: his team has played technically terrible this year. So that begins to fall on the manager. But I feel the last 2 days, and again, we're doing this on a Tuesday. The Mets blew the big game against Philadelphia on Sunday. They lost a 2-1 game to Milwaukee on Monday, is totally playing the results. I mean, before the game, he knows he doesn't have Raley and Ottavino on Sunday. Robertson is in his late 30s. He was on fumes at the end of last season. To your point, you got one good reliever. You're just going to, with a 3-run lead in the 8th inning, say, let's use him here, and then we'll use whatever garbage in the 9th for the bottom of the order. I just feel like that's playing the results. How about don't hit 2 guys in a row? Don't botch a double play ground ball, Brett Beatty. And then yesterday, like Drew Smith hadn't pitched in 10 days because of his suspension. Everyone else is on fumes. He's going to pitch in that game. And when you're trailing by 1 run, with 3 at-bats left at home, you've got to try to keep the game 2-1 to win. The idea of, oh, now you're using the good relievers. I just think it's nonsense playing the results over the reality.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. I never like to question when a manager is cautious with guys' health, particularly if it's a 38-year-old. So I generally thought it was okay. He did earlier in the year use Robertson against the better hitters a lot, which I thought was great, and perhaps he should have done it this time. Maybe he was planning to use them in the ninth. Probably why not the eighth against those good hitters? But I mean, it would show quite a bit of desperation with a 3-run lead to bring in
on June 23rd,
your one good
reliever.
One day after, and I went down to Philly with my daughter, and we watched. He pitched an inning in 2/3. Now I know it was only 13 pitches the day before, but he is 38 years old. We can't lose him at this point. You figure, even the mundane reliever can hold a 3-run lead. I really can't kill him for that. I mean, I guess we can second guess it, certainly, and part of it is the result, but I could see that as a second guess. I don't have him on my list as one of the 5 issues. I will say this. They have not looked technically like a very good team, as you said, right? I mean, they made some bonehead mistakes. Of course, we see the Yankees make bonehead mistakes, too. We see a lot of bonehead mistakes, but it doesn't seem like a Buck Showalter team to underachieve like that. Look at those Baltimore teams. Look how they played. Now, maybe he was blessed with, Nick Markakis and Hardy, and he had great instinctual players who were, got the most out of their ability. This team is not getting the most out of its ability. And how do we know that? They won 101 games last year with virtually the same team minus Diaz. I mean, Diaz is good, but he's not a 30-win pitcher, right?
Yeah, you called the Mets bullpen mundane. I think they're sub-mundane. I think they have to climb up several ladder rungs to get to mundane.
Yeah, what's Drew Smith? We don't know. I mean, the guy comes back from a suspension, gives up a 2-run home run right away. I mean, is he going to be able to pitch without all that sticky stuff? I'm questioning it. I thought Scherzer would be able to do it, and he's been fine. He's actually been better since he's come back, and he's a Hall of Famer. Not to compare him to Scherzer, but I mean, what is Drew Smith at this point? He's back from a suspension, gives up a home run to a really all or nothing, mostly nothing guy, a guy who's mostly a defender, right? Joey Weimer. I mean, that just killed them.
Yeah, you mentioned the Yankees, and why don't we just quickly to wrap up our A block here? We both wrote about the toe gate this week, the right big toe of
That's
Aaron
the story.
Judge.
That's it. That's the whole story with the Yankees.
Yeah, it is the whole story with the Yankees. Look, to their credit, I think they're 8-10 in their first 18 games. They're kind of like, as opposed to the Mets, not like blowing off into the distance. The Rangers are a pretty good team. They took 2 out of 3. Again, I think it goes back to their run prevention and their ability to use so many guys in the bullpen to get guys out. But John, what do you think about where Aaron Judge? Again, we both talked to him over the weekend. We both wrote columns on him. He's pretty much the whole team. It's not supposed to be that way. What do you think about it right now?
Yeah, what a thing that all we do is write about a guy's toe. I mean, that's kind of sad on our part, but I mean, I give the guy credit for, I mean, I'm sure that he's in great pain. He doesn't, when he walks, he looks, better than I do, certainly. He's not saying ow or anything like that. He's just walking, but I believe him. I believe that he's a high tolerance for pain, and he wants to be out there very, very badly. I mean, he explained to me basically that it's not turf toe because it's in a different position, the torn ligament. And I didn't understand why the torn ligament became such a big thing, because we knew it was a sprain. A sprain basically means
a tear.
Right. So yeah. I didn't get that part of it.
A lot of dummies do our job, John.
Well, the fact that you asked, can you guarantee that he would play this year? I thought that, you know what, the more I think about it, it was interesting the way he answered it. I give that some, I give you points for that. And I think there was something to it that Boone just wouldn't do it.
So can I just say this, John?
We'll see. But one thing Judge said to me is that the turf toe is usually 6 to 8 weeks. This is in a different spot, which kind of hinted like maybe it'll be more than 6 to 8 weeks. And 6 to 8 weeks at this point would be 1 to 3 weeks after the All-Star break. So that's probably optimal at this point. So unfortunately, it turned out to be a very bad injury.
Yeah, look, we talked to Boone on Saturday after we talked to Judge, and I had never seen Judge as kind of downcast as he was. Now, I think he doesn't do timetables for a very specific reason. He got chip fracture in his hand. I think it was in 2018. And I think right away the Yankees say this is about a 3-week injury, and he ended up being out for 7 weeks. And, this is a serious athlete who cares about his team and being on the field. And I don't think he liked the thought of like, oh, what's taking him so long? Is he malingering? So I think he doesn't want his stuff out on the street, which is why I think we never get any clarity with Judge. I think this is Judge ordered not to get the clarity.
I don't blame him. I mean, the Yankees look at everything with rose-colored glasses. I'm not going to believe anything they say.
Remember when Nick Johnson was only going to be out 2 days and he missed like 2 years for us?
2 days. Well, how about Mike Gallego? He was day-to-day and he missed 51 days. I remember he gained a few pounds.
God, we're old. We're talking Nick Johnson and Mike Gallego.
Who remembers Mike Gallego? But I do remember Mike Stanley making a funny line about 20 days into this. He said, he was on the 15-day deal. He said, "What are you on the 15-pound deal?" When you're not playing, you might start to look a little different if you keep eating. But if you remember the first day, they said he was day-to-day. Why say anything? You don't know. At that point, they hadn't taken the test. They don't have the results. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt that they knew nothing. If they knew that he had a torn ligament, they tell us day-to-day. That's not really being honest. I think they didn't know anything. Why announce day-to-day? They look at everything very positively. I almost get it with the lineup. I think Boone's lineup is kind of looking through rose-colored glasses, that he's putting Stanton, batting him third or fourth every day when he's, they say he's streaky, right? He's in one of those bad streaks, right? So find somebody else. I know they only have Rizzo who can bat third or fourth. Fine, yes, go with McKinney. Do something else, right?
Yeah.
They don't have a lot of choice.
MVP Billy McKinney coming.
I mean, he's actually he's got about 1,000 OPS without Judge, so he's almost approximated Judge's production.
This year's Matt Carpenter.
Yeah, I mean, he's been great. Good for him, and that's one positive. And you're right, 8-10. That's pretty good considering they're basically last in every offensive category without Judge as a team. Not McKinney, everybody else.
John, on the subject of without Judge. The San Francisco Giants, that was their big guy they were going after in the offseason. They're without Judge, and yet they're in a playoff position as we speak. We're going to talk to their president of baseball operations, Farhan Zaidi, about all of that if you stick with us on the show with Joel Sherman and John Heyman. Joining us on the show is the president of baseball operations, I believe year 5 with the San Francisco Giants, Farhan Zaidi. Farhan, thank you so much for joining us. I'll start here. You were really kind to me in spring training. I think we sat for more than 60 minutes in your box during the game. And I was asking you a ton of Carlos Correa and Aaron Judge questions and who's the second best player on your team after Logan Webb. And as we sit here today, Judge is hurt, Correa isn't playing well, and you have a better record than the Minnesota Twins and the New York Yankees. How are you doing it, and do you believe in it? Do you think you're a playoff team as we sit here today? Do you believe in what you've seen so far for half a season?
Yeah, we do believe in it, and appreciate the intro, and we're very excited about how the team is playing. And look, those guys are great players, and there's a reason we pursued them as aggressively as we did. But this is professional sports and Major League Baseball, and big free agents always have options and alternatives. And so we were prepared, with a pretty long list of targets, those guys included, and probably at the top of the list. But we've done it with a combination of the guys we did wind up bringing in. I remember your question about the second best player on the team, and I said Michael Conforto, and he's given us a really nice boost in the middle of the lineup. And a lot of the returning players that we have, J.D. Davis, Thairo Estrada, Lamont Wade, are all guys that we're pushing for the All-Star team, deservedly so. And we've had an influx of young players over the last month, led by Patrick Bailey and Casey Schmidt, who have really, been a nice spark for the team and helped us go on this run. So we believe in it partly because it's not coming from any one place. It's coming from a combination of players. And that's sort of our team building philosophy is, to build a whole that's greater than the sum of the parts. And the guys are doing a great job executing on that.
Well, congratulations on your start, Farhan. I'm glad you mentioned Estrada and Davis. It seems like you really have a knack for finding players elsewhere who are just doing okay or average and bringing them in, and they do much better for you. I don't know if there's some trick to this. I mean, when you're with the Dodgers, obviously Chris Taylor, I'm a not going to do it justice because it's a long list. Chris Taylor, Max Muncy. I don't know how you feel about improving the main competitor that you have now with all these great pickups, but what is the secret to getting these kind of players? Estrada and Davis have been outstanding for you.
Well, we played the Dodgers a couple of weeks ago, and even though I really like Max as Muncy as a player and a guy, it didn't hurt my feelings that he was out for that series because he's really killed us. But as a broader point, I think so much of it is cultural. We can all identify players who have good tools, who have strong minor league performance, and maybe haven't gotten over the hump in the major leagues. But really having patience with those guys and kind of pushing through some of the early struggles that guys have. If you can create that kind of culture, I think you can get the most out of players. So, I look at a guy like Mike Yastrzemski, who we got from the Orioles in the offseason of 2018-19. He got off to a great start in AAA, came up to the big leagues, had a good first few games, then got cold. And, it's kind of well known that, right before the Colorado series where he went off and established himself really as a big leaguer for the long run, we at least had the conversation about sending him down. Myself and Bruce Bochy were talking through it, and we said, let's just kind of power through this and see what happens, and the rest is history. So I think having that kind of patience, having a culture where you're looking to reward younger players and give them opportunities, that's a big key to all of that.
Farhan, you mentioned playing the Dodgers. You won, I think you swept the 3-game series there as part of a 10-game winning streak recently, which was quite something. And I think part of the questions I was asking in spring training were based on the Dodgers are always good, and look at what the Padres are doing. And yet the reality is Arizona is leading your division. You're in second place as we speak. You're 43-34. What do you think of this division? Do you still think this version of the Dodgers, are they a Leviathan and they're going to rise up at some point? And do you think the Padres' talent will play at some point? Or is there a real avenue there for you to get to the top like you did 2 years ago?
Yeah, I certainly think there's a path for us and those teams. I do expect the Padres to play better. The Dodgers have been dealing with their share of injuries, and they were shorthanded when we played them. Obviously, we've been shorthanded too, but in the end, we think those teams are going to be there. But I don't know whether it's a personality trait that I have, but I've always been a very stubborn competitor. I back in the day when we used to play, pickup basketball in spring training in Arizona, even if I was on a team that lost 2 or 3 in a row, I'd want to run it back and think we've had enough. I'd never be the guy who wanted to change teams. So, even in a division like we are, that's really competitive and where there are star players kind of all over the place, I think we collectively think we're just as good as those teams. And so, the run that we had through the division the last couple of weeks, I think proved that point to us and to other people. And look, there's a lot of season left, so we're not taking any victory laps now, but we feel good about our chance to compete with those teams.
You're 10 games over at this point. I mean, what were your expectations coming in? I know a lot of people did not expect you to be a contender. You clearly are now. I know you feel confident at the moment, having seen 78 games, 78 good games. Did you think so going in, that you were a contender?
I did. And some of it, I think, has to do with, the history over the last couple of years. Obviously, in 21, we had, really successful season, won 107 games. I think people look back on our 22 season as a big disappointment, which it was, but we didn't lose 100 games. We finished at 500. We had a plus 19 run differential, and then we went out and spent $200 million on free agency to improve our team. We had guys that we thought would bounce back. We have rookies that we expected to contribute, so we definitely expected to be better than we were last year when we were 500. So we expected to be a winning team. We expected to compete. And I think some of the headlines that some of those bigger free agent pursuits took up maybe took away from the underlying storyline that we had a pretty solid, deep group of players on our roster and had a chance to do what we've done so far.
As often as John was right. He mentioned you were 10 games over 500. I looked down quick. I saw the Dodger record is 43-34. As we speak, you're 44-34. I don't want to shortchange you. The San Francisco Giants, you're 10 over 500. Look, you mentioned it here, who you went after in the offseason, that you did spend $200 million. We'd be naive not to recognize, since it's John and I, our audience is a heavy New York audience. Can you take us through, Judge, Did you think there was a moment, yep, we're going to get the biggest star who's not named Shohei Ohtani in the game to come back to Northern California, hit in the middle of our lineup? I think your plan was to actually play him in center field because that's what he wanted to do. Take us through your emotions and how close you were.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a coping mechanism, but I never really believed he was going to sign here. I kind of, I think like with a lot of things, you kind of want to control your emotions. And, and baseball is so unpredictable, both with free agency and with trades. I mean, there have been so many times when I thought a trade was at the 1 yard line or 5 yard line, and it winds up not happening. So you don't really believe something's done until it's done. I mean, look, as disappointed as we were with the way that wound up, I think the way Aaron got started this season, the question is less, should be less, why we weren't able to sign him, and more where the other 28 teams, everybody could use him with as terrific a player as he is. But look, at the end of the day, I think he gave us real consideration. He flew out here with his wife. Spent the weekend with us, spent a lot of time with us. And I know there's been talk that it was leverage and this and that, but I believe the interest was sincere. And I think about, big life decisions that we've all had to make, whether it was about a job or a move. And, you run hot and cold on it. I'm guessing there were times when Aaron thought the idea of playing for the Giants and being closer to his family was really appealing. And I mean, how can you not feel the pull of being a Yankee for life? I mean, it's a great organization. So I think we went back and forth a little bit and then wound up doing what felt right to him. And, we completely understood it. But, we put our best foot forward, and it was great getting to know Aaron. And he's really, one of the great players in the game. So I think it was just logical and sensible for us to do everything we could to land him.
Your coping mechanism was logical and probably ultimately smart. I was one who thought you had a real shot for a couple minutes anyway, incorrectly. I want to ask you a broader question. I love San Francisco. I've never lived there. I've been there many, many times, obviously, covering the Yankees, the Mets, before that, the Angels even. Why do you think it's now? Obviously, you've gotten players. Jock Peterson is from the area, and he knew you, so we had two pluses there. But it seems like it's difficult to get players to go to San Francisco, which, I mean, it's one of the best cities in America as far as I'm concerned. What do you think is going on there in terms of the difficulty?
Yeah, I don't think that's necessarily true. We did sign 7 free agents this past offseason. Obviously, Jock being one of them who accepted a qualifying offer. So maybe that doesn't, quite qualify, as somebody choosing us. But, I think we deal with the usual East Coast, West Coast scenarios with players, guys that grew up in the South, grew up in Florida. I think they're attracted to teams that play spring training in Florida and, have preferences to stay on the East Coast. Guys that grew up on the West Coast, grew up in California, and particularly guys who grew up in the Bay Area. It's a dream for them to play for us. So, I think we deal with some of that, regional preference based on where guys grew up. And then you layer on that, John, you mentioned it with Jock, Ross Stripling is another example, Alex Wood, guys that somebody in the organization has a relationship with, whether it's myself or someone else. That really helps too. I mean, we're really trying to pitch, as much as geography. I mean, San Francisco is a beautiful city. I mean, it's I'm biased, but I think it's the best place to live in the world. But beyond pitching the city, I think it's important for us to pitch the organization. Some of what we touched on earlier, our ability to help players be the best version of themselves. And, we've had a number of players come through here the last few years that have performed really well and are in contracts either here or elsewhere. That I think they would say we were at least some small part of with our development system. So I think the overall pitch is really solid and attracts a lot of players, and we feel good about it. And we just know that there are going to be some players that prefer playing on the East Coast, and that's something all West Coast teams deal with.
Farhan, you mentioned you were surprised that more teams didn't go after Judge when you saw how he began the season. I actually asked him the other day, do you think you're underpaid watching the team play without him? One player who ended up on kind of 3 teams this offseason was Correa. All right. You had him, the Mets had him, and ultimately the Twins had him. Look, I don't want to kind of be the guy who keeps going back and asking, like, why did it go this way? So I wonder if I could ask a bigger question there is, at the moment that you lose Judge and Correa, there is a perception that grows. Oh, the Giants are having a terrible offseason. And of course, the teams we thought that were having a good offseasons were the Padres and the Mets. And look at where they are now. What does it take for the guy who's steering baseball operations to tell people who he works for, his fan base, etc., that this is not going to define us? We could still be a good team. And if you'd like to take us through Correa a little bit, feel free to do it.
Yeah, I think the perspective is different. You guys have a job and a responsibility to explain what happened. We have a responsibility to turn the page and move on in that moment. So I would say, despite, some of the public rhetoric and narrative around, how our offseason was going, we turned the page really quickly. In fact, I think we signed Michael Conforto and, Taylor Rogers, who's had a great season for us as well, within a couple of days of, the Correa deal not working out. So we had kind of our list of targets, and we moved on pretty quickly. The narrative lingered, which is understandable. I mean, Carlos is one of the greatest stars in the game, and what happened with him this offseason was really unfortunate. And I'm happy he wound up in a situation that he was happy with. He was terrific, by the way. I mean, we met with him. He was really impressive. He was really invested in what we were trying to do and build. And so I have nothing but the best things to say about Carlos from that process. And again, it was unfortunate how it worked out, but again, happy that he wound up, in a good place, in a place where he had success last season and where his family's happy. And as for us, again, it was just a quick turning of the page. And obviously, I think it's necessary in this job to sometimes tune out some of the noise that comes with, oh, what happened? How do we explain that? What are they going to do now? We have our internal playbook, and we move on quickly. And I think, again, getting back to that notion of being a competitor, you don't cry over spilt milk. You turn the page and you move on, because your competitors are not going to sit around and wait for you to pick up the pieces. So that was very much our mode internally. And I think when you heard myself or Pete Patella or Gabe Kapler talk about our team, and we've been excited about this group all offseason. And again, I think it was drowned out by some of the larger narrative. But, again, I think that just comes with the territory. There are times you're going to target a player. It's not going to work out. You got to just move on and have something else in mind.
Yeah, I'm not sure you can answer this, but I'll give it a shot anyway. You named the right price for Judge. I think you were the ones who said the 360 for 9. And they just matched it. Do you think there was some price you could have gotten him at, and would you have gone higher? Because as Joel said, compared to what some of the other guys were offered or got, he does look underpaid to us.
Yeah, it's impossible to say. I think it's a fair question, but I think it kind of came down, like I said, to where Aaron felt it was the right place to be. And I think he probably knew that when he presented one of the teams with, hey, this is what it's going to take. It's kind of hard to say no in that scenario. So again, two things can be true, that I think he gave us real consideration, but ultimately decided that was the right spot for him. And I think once he decided that, that was one of the many impressive things about the Judges is I don't think they were looking to squeeze every last dollar out of the process. I think he knew what he was worth. He knew what he could get comfortably. And then at that point, it was just about choosing the right situation for him. So hats off to him for, I think, going about the process in a really impressive and respectful way.
Yeah, you didn't end up with Judge in the outfield, but you ended up with another New York player, a player with New York roots in Conforto. You've mentioned his name a couple of times. I believe a 2-year, $36 million contract where he has the player option in year 2. I think as we speak, he's got 12 homers. He's got about a 111 OPS plus. He missed all of last season due to shoulder problems. What have you? Does he look like Michael Conforto pre-injuries? What does he look like to you?
I think he really does. I mean, he's been impressive since the first day of camp, not just swinging the bat, but obviously throwing, which was the biggest concern coming off the shoulder injury. It's been a total non-issue. He's played a very solid corner outfield for us, played a lot of right field where obviously the demands on your arm are greater. And in our ballpark, no less, which is a big right field where you have to deal with, the unconventionalness of the right field wall. He's been a little streaky, I think, even by his own account. And there are times when I think he feels like the missed time, it takes a little bit longer for him to refine his swing when he does fall out of a groove a little bit. But we couldn't ask for more. I mean, he's hitting 3, 4, 5 in our lineup every day. He's playing a lot. He brings so much consistency to the lineup. And, again, our philosophy is to have a lineup where 1 through 9, we grind, we have high at-bat quality, and we just make it as difficult as possible for the opposing pitcher to get through our lineup over and over again. And, I think some of the talk in the offseason about us needing that, quote unquote superstar in the middle of the lineup, I think, overlooks the fact that we just have a lineup 1 through 9 of guys that are going to grind. And, I think you've seen it with the offensive performance that, there are synergies when you have guys feeding off each other, having those kinds of quality at bats. So, for him to be a guy who, Cap can stick in the middle of the lineup 3, 4, 5 every day. He's been productive. He's driving in runs. He's hitting for power, and he's having good at bats. I'm playing solid defensively. That's really all we could ask for.
You've done great with your free agents that you did sign, and one is Alex Cobb, who really was great for you guys earlier. So I specifically wanted to ask about him, how he's doing, and also how that may affect the trade deadline. I assume you'll be a buyer and probably looking for pitching like everybody else, but thought I would ask you.
Yeah, we expect him to be back on this road trip. We've got Toronto and New York, and he's eligible in New York. He pitched a rehab game over the weekend for our San Jose club and felt great. So, it's basically he's right back in the rotation, which is really great to see. We actually have a pretty deep pitching staff, both in the rotation and the pen. We've got a couple of guys, Sean Manaea, Ross Stripling, and I throw Alex Wood in there as guys that, we think are really solid kind of mid-rotation guys. And we expect them to pitch better as the season goes along. So I think the trade deadline outlook for us is going to come down to health. We have a lot of internal options. When you look at starting pitching, we've got Kyle Harrison knocking on the door as well. We've got 3 young pitchers, Keaton Wynn, Tristan Beck, and Sean Jelly, who've come up and sort of pitched in that bulk role, haven't really been in the rotation where they're starting every 5th day, but we think they're capable. So there would be a high bar for us to go out and acquire starting pitching that we thought was a real upgrade over that. I know you guys have taught some about what the supply and demand looks like there. It's not great. If you're looking for, back end, a number 5 starter, that's going to be available, but I don't think we're going to be in that market. So our preference and our belief is that we have everything internally that we need, especially from a depth standpoint. And any team that's contending is going to look at guys who bring real impact. But again, the supply and demand on that will be interesting. And it's really, too soon to tell who's going to be available in that category.
On the subject of the trade deadline, you had a big win last year. You turned Darren Ruff into J.D. Davis and 3 pitching prospects. And even if it wasn't the 3 pitching prospects, you could tell us about the quality of those. I mean, J.D. Davis, the Mets would kill to have someone who looks just like J.D. Davis. The problem is they had someone who looked just like J.D. Davis and gave him to you for Darren Ruff, who doesn't play with them anymore. Tell us about that trade and tell us about J.D. Davis and what he means to your ball club.
Yeah, look, I've known Billy Epler for a long time, with a lot of respect for Billy. And, what he was looking for was somebody who come in and hit in the middle of their lineup against left-handed pitching. And Darren Ruff, for us, up to that point, had really been one of the best kind of right-handed bats against left-handed pitching in baseball over the previous, 2.5 years. So Billy targeted the right guy, in my opinion. And, Darren is a guy that was really popular in our clubhouse that still filled a role on our team. And, we were still within striking distance of the wild card at that time. So we weren't in pure sell mode. So, we set a really high price. And I know it was a tough decision for Billy, but he was trying to improve his team in a very specific area where Darren actually fit him better than JD at the time. So I completely understood it from his perspective. And it's not like we were high-fiving in the room when he made that deal. It was tough to trade Darren Ruff. JD was just a guy that we had liked for a long time, dating back to his time in Houston. In fact, when the Mets traded for him, that was my first offseason with the Giants, and we were trying to trade for him as well. Just loved the bat, loved the patience and power. And, no an area where he had difficulty in New York was just defensively being consistent at third base. And, they tried him some in first base and left field. And that didn't really work out. And by the way, we did the same thing when we first got JD. We kind of moved him around. We're looking for a defensive home for him. He swung the bat really well for us. And I give Kai Correa and our coaching group a lot of credit. They did a lot of work with him. Credit JD for putting in the work. And I think just the consistency of just sticking him at third and leaving him there and letting him focus on one defensive position has really brought out the best in him. So, a lot of good fortune for us in that deal, which was difficult to make at the time. And I really understand it from the Mets perspective as well.
Last one for me, boy. You've had a lot of players come from New York and do well. Estrada's really turned out to be a very good player. But, we've talked for 20 or 25 minutes about what a great job you do there with the Giants. And I think I saw a quote, I don't know if it was from Larry Bear or one of your bosses saying that they hope to resolve your contractual situation, your future, and they wanted to keep you. So I thought I would ask you while you're here, is that situation resolved at this point?
I think you have a better chance of getting me to discuss Judge and Correa than you do my own situation.
We did get you to discuss Judge and Correa. So
that's true. So 2 out of 3 isn't bad. I mean,
I gave it a shot. I gave it a shot. What can I tell you?
No, I felt really supported by our ownership group. Even when some of the headlines weren't great this offseason with some of those free agent pursuits. So, that's what you really appreciate is when you get the internal support, even when the media clippings aren't great. And so I'm really happy with the Giants. I hope I'm here for a long time. And getting that kind of support, it goes a long way. So that's my official comment on that matter.
That's fine. That's good. That's a good answer.
So I was going to ask one more. Okay, I'll ask one more. It will be easier because, again, it's about the job you do. I don't think anybody had, who has really good prospects? The San Francisco Giants. And yet, you mentioned it. Patrick Bailey, Matos, Blake Sable, Schmidt. How much these guys have helped you coming up with, I think, no major league experience on any of the 4 people I mentioned. Surprised at all? And I wonder if I could just drill down. Matos is the one guy who people thought was a very strong prospect. And so far, it's just a handful of games. Is he your center fielder going forward from now? Or when you get some injured guys back, is he going back down?
Yeah, I mean, I've been asked that question. Obviously, Mitch Haniger had a really difficult injury. We're still hoping he's back in September. But, the way Luis is playing, and we've said if he is a productive big leaguer, he's not going anywhere. I mean, he can impact the game in the field. He's played a great center field for us on the bases. And, it's been really impressive the step forward he's taken with his plate discipline. The quality of his at-bats has been terrific, was really the one thing we thought he needed to tweak, to get over the hump. So really excited about how he's playing. And I think he's here to stay if he continues to produce. That's sort of the view we have with all our young players. I know you guys talk to a lot of GMs and probably we would go 30 for 30 and all telling you that our farm system is better than the rankings and better than people think. So, the most validating thing is when guys come up and produce and help your big league team. That's the whole point of having a farm system. So, I understand people that do the rankings, they're not biased one way or another. They're just trying to be objective. And so if you exceed the expectations in that regard, that just speaks to having good player development and good fortune to a degree. So we're obviously excited about what we've gotten from those guys.
Well, Farhan, thank you so much for going through Judge once again and Correa once again and talking to you about your team, which, again, I've got to say, in spring training, you believed heavily in it. And I didn't think you were just kind of giving me the policy line. I as you know, I was suspicious. I'm asking who your second best player is. But so far as we sit here, half a season in, you're in contention for your division lead. You'd be in the playoffs today. So great job. And thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Appreciate it. Figured talking to a couple of New York guys, I knew which questions were coming. So
you're well prepared as always. Very good. Thank you.
All right, thank you,
Farhan. John, another week to play hit or error. What do you got?
I'm going to give MLB a hit this week. The attendance is up 7.8% over last year. That's quite a bump. I think the new rules is part of that. I don't know if it's the lack of the pandemic, which is good for all of us. Maybe it's all the surprise contenders. I do think the new rules are the biggest factor, and that's a pretty good bump, 7.8%. Obviously, Oakland's not helping it, but the other 29 teams, well, I'll take Miami out of that too. The other 28 teams are doing a good job at getting people to the games.
Yeah, and I think they ran another successful event in London, also to another feather in their cap there. For hitter error, I don't know whether it's a hitter error. I'm gonna suggest that they not make an error and they make sure that Ellie De La Cruz is at the All-Star game. I would say that the All-Star game is an entertainment, a TV show. That's all it is a TV show. It's publicity for the sport. We have a year where Nolan Arenado and Manny Machado, who are the two obvious guys, are both way down this year. Austin Riley isn't as good as he was last year. They're the obvious people to send are not having good years. Now, the finalists, I believe, are Riley and Arenado, so it's going to be one of those two to start. But just as a way to show off our game and show off the future, I would make sure Ellie De La Cruz was at the All-Star game.
I'm with you on that one. Love to see Ali De La Cruz in person. I haven't seen him yet. He looks even better so far in the highlights than he was projected to be. So incredible. And yes, he should be in Seattle. Agreed.
I think by this time, when we do our show next week, John, we should know who the All-Star starters are. Then you and I have to get on a plane. So we hope everyone keeps listening to the show, a podcast from the New York Post. Thank you to our producers, as always, Jake Brown and Andrew Hartz, for helping us get us through this. Don't forget the show drops every Wednesday at about noon on the Yes app. Give us a view there. Subscribe to the show on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And please give us a 5-star rating. And John, I hope they stick with us. I hope we have something else to talk about besides the Mets next week if you stay with us on the show with Joel Sherman and John Heyman.